游记. Welcome to Journey of the Cloud Walker.
Recently, I wanted to share a life update with all of you. I have found a new job. Over the past several months, I went through a very long period of unemployment, roughly 8 months in total. 8 months may now sound extraordinarily long, but when your days are filled with sending applications, waiting for replies, opening email after email, only to see rejection letters, time begins to feel unusually heavy. I found this job through a government social service agency, and I applied for it myself. To be honest, when I submitted the application, I didn't have much confidence at all. I simply thought that there was no harm in trying. Before this, I had applied for quite a few positions, but many companies didn't even offer me an interview opportunity. So when I finally received an interview invitation, I already felt that it was something worth appreciating. In the end, this was also the only company that interviewed me, and it was the one that offered me the position. Overall, the interview process went relatively smoothly. It wasn't nearly as intimidating as I had imagined. The question that left the deepest impression on me was when they asked me to describe a difficult problem that I had personally resolved. Questions like this do not simply test your experience itself. They test whether you can organize your experiences into a logical and convincing narrative within a short period of time. Looking back, I think the reason I secured this job was partly due to my previous relevant work experience, but also because I prepared extensively beforehand. I rehearsed many possible interview questions and thought carefully about how to present my strengths naturally through examples and wording. Very often, having ability is important, but knowing how to make others recognize that ability is equally important. When I received the offer, my first reaction was actually very practical. I would finally have a stable income again. There was no dramatic emotional moment and no overwhelming excitement. More than anything, it felt like relief. During the process of searching for work, the most exhausting part is often not failing interviews, but receiving rejection after rejection. That continuous sense of rejection can genuinely make a person question their own value, or even question the necessity of their own existence. Rationally, you understand that rejection doesn't necessarily mean that you are inadequate, but emotionally, it's still difficult not to be affected. I left my previous job because the company reduced the staff members in the name of improving efficiency, and I was made redundant. In truth, I had already begun considering changing jobs before that happened. So in some ways, redundancy merely accelerated something that was already in motion. Because of that, I didn't hesitate very much when deciding to seek a new job. The people around me didn't particularly object either, because in this era, job stability is no longer something that can simply be taken for granted. If I had to describe what mattered most to me while searching for a new role, it wasn't necessarily salary. What mattered more was that the work should involve low levels of harm and danger. Salary is important, of course, but I care more about whether a job allows me to maintain my life under a relatively sustainable level of pressure. Before finding this job, my greatest fear was that the unemployment gap would continue indefinitely. When income disappears and the future becomes unclear, anxiety slowly begins to erode a person's sense of security, especially when you do not know how long that state will continue. The psychological pressure becomes far heavier than outsiders may imagine. My new job is in a fairly traditional service industry role. Although the industry itself is different from what I worked in previously, fundamentally it's still about providing service and interacting with people. The current role involves face-to-face interaction with customers, and there's a relatively balanced combination of mental and physical labor, which was one of the aspects that attracted me to it. The salary is slightly better than I originally expected, and I'm genuinely grateful for that. It's not exceptionally high, but at least it has allowed my basic life to regain a degree of stability. The working hours are very different from what I was used to before. Previously, my work schedule was closer to a regular 9-to-5 structure. Now, the work is shift-based, including very early morning shifts and very late night shifts. So my sleeping pattern has become highly irregular. At times, it feels as though I'm permanently adjusting to jet lag. That is currently the hardest aspect for me to adapt to. Fortunately, after moving house, my commute has become relatively short, which reduces a considerable amount of physical exhaustion. As for the atmosphere within the team, it currently feels fairly relaxed and not excessively high pressure. So overall, the adjustment process has been reasonably smooth. At the moment, the aspect of the new job that I appreciate most is still the salary, because it means that my basic life once again has stability. Naturally, entering a new environment was still nerve-wracking. On my first official day at work, my hands were actually trembling slightly from nervousness. During training, there was a large amount of new information to absorb, and once I officially began working, I experienced a strange mixture of familiarity and unfamiliarity at the same time. The familiarity came from the rhythm of service work itself, while the unfamiliarity came from the new environment and new systems. However, very quickly, I could feel my previous work experience returning to me. Many of those skills had never truly disappeared. Throughout the adjustment process, there were definitely moments when I questioned whether I was good enough. Beginning anything new is difficult, and that is perfectly normal. When you are unfamiliar with procedures and routines, self-doubt naturally emerges. But I reminded myself that competence requires time and refinement, so there was no reason to reject myself too quickly. The pressure in this role is moderate, and I consciously try to avoid exhausting myself emotionally through excessive internalization. Whenever anxiety appears, I simply try to focus on doing the things within my control as well as possible, because so much anxiety actually comes from imagined uncertainties rather than from what is directly in front of us. I don't regret changing jobs, or perhaps more accurately, I don't regret accepting that sometimes life forces people to change direction. In this rapidly shifting era, letting go of the obsession with remaining loyal to a declining industry forever is, in many ways, a necessary choice for survival. Previously, I may have believed that perseverance meant remaining in one field indefinitely, but now I gradually understand that changing direction doesn't represent a failure. It's simply a response to reality. At this point, I feel calmer than before, not because the future has become completely stable, but because life has at least returned to a relatively manageable state. And I think that, as a gay man, this experience has also given me a deeper understanding of the relationship between work and identity. During the job search itself, I didn't particularly worry that my sexual orientation would directly affect the outcome, because it's not central to the work itself. Comparatively speaking, what concerned me more were issues of ability, income, and survival. However, I do deliberately downplay my sexual orientation, not because of shame, but because I do not consider it to be the most important aspect of myself within the workplace. At this stage, my focus is on work, not on coming out. During the interview process, I didn't feel an especially strong sense of self-censorship either. Before applying, I had already researched the company culture and understood that the organization was relatively inclusive and supportive towards LGBTQ people. I care quite a lot about a company's attitude towards LGBTQ communities, and my way of judging that is fairly simple. I search for the social activities the company has participated in previously, whether they have publicly supported equality initiatives, and what their internal cultural reputation is like. Usually, that already reveals quite a lot. I do think that whether an environment is inclusive is important. Even if the work itself is ordinary, spending long periods of time in an environment where you constantly feel the need to suppress parts of yourself eventually becomes exhausting. At the moment, my approach is what I would describe as being myself with certain reservations. I have already noticed several openly gay colleagues within the company, but personally, I still haven't expressed much about myself. My colleagues and supervisors probably do not know my sexual orientation. In fact, some colleagues even assume that I'm already married with children. I haven't felt any strong need to correct those assumptions, because at this stage, it simply doesn't feel necessary. Of course, I still worry about prejudice or subtle discrimination within workplaces. In previous companies, I have heard heterosexual male colleagues make indirect jokes about gay men during casual conversations. The feeling is quite strange, because the people saying those things may not even have malicious intentions. But in that moment, you immediately realize that the environment may not be entirely safe. As a result, you instinctively begin concealing parts of yourself as a form of self-protection. My current work involves a great deal of interaction with people, but I do not particularly wish to present a highly personalized version of myself within the workplace. What I would rather present is a standardized sense of professionalism rather than a deeply personal identity. Because for me, this workplace is ultimately not my personal stage. It's simply a place of work. At the same time, I do feel that being gay sometimes brings certain forms of emotional sensitivity and empathy. It becomes easier to notice subtle emotional changes in other people and easier to understand the delicate emotional dynamics. However, that same sensitivity can also be exploited by manipulative people. In many ways, empathy is both a strength and a vulnerability. This experience of searching for work also helped me understand my identity more clearly. I have become even more certain that my identity is extremely important to me personally, while at the same time being almost insignificant to most other people. Ultimately, what most people care about is whether you are capable of doing your work well. As for listeners who may not yet be out while also searching for work, if I had to offer advice, I'd probably say something rather pragmatic. The work itself and the salary matter more. Survival comes first. Very few people can truly argue against that. Sometimes I do wonder whether life would have been easier if I were not gay. At the very least, I wouldn't need to conceal that particular part of my authentic self. But at the same time, I also do not believe that I should deny my existence because of other people's opinions. To a certain extent, other people's views are neither truly relevant to me nor within my control. If you ask whether I hope to one day express myself more freely within the workplace, honestly, I do not hold particularly strong expectations about that. Ultimately, this is not a space where I possess absolute authority. This new job has neither moved me forwards nor backwards in terms of being myself. If anything, it has simply strengthened my awareness of my own existence. And when I imagine an ideal LGBTQ-friendly workplace, I imagine a place where personalized clothing styles are accepted, where diverse forms of address are respected, and where companies actively participate in supporting LGBTQ social initiatives. True inclusiveness is not merely saying, "We respect you." It is creating an environment where people do not constantly have to wonder whether they should hide themselves. If there ever came a day when I no longer needed to care about other people's judgment, then honestly, I probably wouldn't be working inside somebody else's company at all. I would most likely be running my own business. I would have a freedom over how I dressed. And more importantly, I would be able to express my thoughts openly through my identity and perspective as a gay man, without worrying about how others might perceive me. At the very least, though, I'm calmer now than I used to be. When it comes to finding this job, I think both luck and effort played important roles. Effort prepared me for opportunities, while luck allowed the opportunity to appear at the right moment. This experience has also reminded me that flexibility itself can be a form of strength, not passive surrender, but the willingness to continue moving forward, even when many things remain outside your control. If the current version of myself could say something to the version of myself who struggled through that long period of unemployment, I think I'd still say the same thing. Everything is going to be alright. Because many situations that appear hopeless while you are living through them eventually reveal themselves to be merely temporary stages in life. What feels like losing direction may actually be the beginning of another path. We may never truly control life itself, but at the very least, we can choose the posture with which we face it. And this time, what I learned was to trust that, even if the future remains uncertain, things can still gradually become better.